Welcome back to Borderlines, the only show that takes you beyond borders. Right, I have with me another special guest, but he's pretty much, I think it's safe to call him a friend of the house by now. He's giving us his time, he's honored the show quite a few times. Right, but I will still read out his background for some of you who are new listeners. He is, according to sources, including Ministry of the Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Michael Freeman is a seasoned Israeli diplomat with a focus on Africa, public diplomacy, and international cooperation. Prior to his role in Nigeria, he served in various diplomatic roles in London, Brussels on an EU mission, and the United States. He has been actively involved in interfaith dialogue, peace building initiatives, and international development partnerships. In Nigeria, Ambassador Freeman has worked on strengthening bilateral relations, especially in areas like agriculture, tech innovation, water solutions, education, and security cooperation. Ambassador Freeman, welcome again.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. We always have interesting conversation when you're here. Let's start from the ceasefire. So the ceasefire began in January. It was not going great, but we saw what was happening. Prisoners were being exchanged, or should I say hostages were being exchanged. And then
No, you can't say hostages were being exchanged.
Why can't I say that? Why can't I say that?
Because Hamas were releasing hostages and we were releasing convicted prisoners.
Many Palestinians will disagree with you, including the ambassador that I've just had on, the ambassador to Palestine, the Palestinian ambassador to the UK.
I'm telling you he's wrong. And I'm telling you that the majority of those people who were released were convicted murderers, were convicted terrorists, were people who murdered people in cold blood, who had gone through the Israeli court systems, were convicted and were serving prison sentences. And it is absolutely outrageous and absolutely disgraceful to compare the release of somebody who ordered and organized the bombing of a bus that killed civilians, or the stabbing of a child when they were at a supermarket, with a baby who was strangled by their Hamas murderers and released in a coffin. There is no comparison. You cannot make the comparison, and it is utterly sick to do so.
Well, like I said, Palestinians will disagree with you, but of course, everybody's their own. So let's go back to this.
No, hang on a minute. I think it's very important. I'm not going to move on.
If you're not going to move on, we're not going to be able to do this interview, because not only are you shouting at me, but I am giving you the other side. I let you speak. I did not interrupt you. I let you speak. I did not interrupt you. You have stated that case, and I'm not arguing with that. I am saying to you, like I said to him, Israel will disagree with this. I am saying to you now, Palestinians will disagree with this. You don't want to move on. The interview ends, but we certainly cannot have a shouting.
I'm saying that we have to agree and understand that there are objective facts. There are opinions and there are facts. And whether or not the Palestinian wants to accept those facts doesn't make them not facts. And the reality is, and the facts are, they were convicted terrorists. They were convicted for murder. They went through the court system. They sat in prison and they murdered and they killed and they ordered terror attacks. And that's an important difference between a 9-month-old baby who was murdered by Hamas terrorists, a 4-year-old child that was murdered by Hamas terrorists, and terrorists who murdered. And that's the difference. We can move on, but there may be a difference of opinion. There cannot be a difference of fact.
But that's what I said, that Palestinians will disagree. Right? Can we move on now? Right.
As long as you've established the fact.
Well, I mean, you have your fact. The Palestinians will say they have their fact. That's why we invited you.
Well, no, hang on. One second. I'm not on this.
We are not going to get very far.
1 second, please.
If we keep going
please, this is very important.
Go ahead.
No, we're not going back. I'm not going to go back on the point.
Ambassador.
But if somebody said to you the world is round, and then somebody else said the world is flat, you wouldn't say, well, here we've got two different people with two different facts. You'd say there's two people with two different opinions, but there's only one set of facts here. The earth is round. It isn't flat. So I'm telling you that the Palestinian can have as many opinions as you like, but it doesn't change the basic facts.
Right, but Okay, let's move on because there are several other examples I could have given you for that. Let's go back to this ceasefire again, which was going to be the beginning of the show, given we've lost time. Right, so this ceasefire was going, not great, but it was happening. Hostages were being exchanged. I think it was in March, it lasted for 2 months. Israel pulled out of the ceasefire. Tell us why.
But Israel didn't pull out the ceasefire. What happened was that the ceasefire, the first stage finished, and the agreement was to then move on to the second stage. During that second stage, it became clear that Hamas wasn't negotiating in good faith. They were using the time to plan further attacks on Israeli troops, to plan further attacks on Israeli citizens inside Israel. And the mediators put forward a number of proposals to release more hostages, including the Americans. The American negotiator, Steve Witkoff, put forward a proposal, two different proposals. There were other proposals that were put forward, and Hamas rejected every single one of them. And we warned over and over again that without the release of hostages, the ceasefire couldn't go on, and we weren't going to give Hamas all the time they wanted to rebuild, to regroup, and to replan further terrorist attacks us, like they did on October the 7th. And so since Hamas were very clear they had no intention of releasing hostages, unfortunately, the ceasefire broke down.
Right. So talk to us about when you say the negotiations, or what was it you said? I don't want to misquote you. Tell us what Israel was asking for.
The release of hostages. This isn't a difficult concept. This isn't a difficult concept, and this is a very important point.
Okay.
This is a very important point. Hamas is holding 59 Israeli hostages. These are people that on October the 7th, they came across the border, and after they'd finished raping, murdering, burning people alive, torturing, and killing, they then decided to kidnap a number of Israelis, over 250. They are still holding 59 of them. People they grabbed from out of their beds in the middle of the night. They grabbed them from a peace music festival, and they dragged them where they have been keeping them for a year and a half underground. They are keeping them in chains. They are beating them. They have injured them. They are starving them. They are abusing them every single day, and they need to be released. It's very simple.
Right. So let's go back. What was Israel asking for again?
To release the hostages. They're holding 59 of them.
Okay. But however, the original ceasefire deal was, once it started, 16 days into it, there would then be the next step to negotiation of the phase 2. Why didn't Israel do that?
Well, we were faced with Hamas, who made very, very clear that they were not going to continue in those negotiations in good faith. They laid down two basic principles: that they would not give up their arms, and they would stay in de facto control of the Gaza Strip. We cannot accept a situation ever where Hamas will be in charge, remain with arms, and they will remain in de facto or any other form of control of the Gaza Strip.
Okay.
And if the starting point of negotiations is a point that we cannot possibly ever accept, then there was no point in moving on. We tried to move on, and Hamas kept saying, let's be clear, we want to keep our arms, we want to rebuild, and we want to carry out October the 7th again and again and again, and unless you do that, then we're not going to agree to anything. Well, once that became the situation, that became very clear, there's not much of a conversation to have.
But that wasn't the terms of the ceasefire. What had been agreed...
Well, that was the terms of the ceasefire. The terms of the ceasefire...
Michael, may I finish, please, Ambassador? Sorry. Right, let me just come back. The terms of the ceasefire was 16 days, then they begin the negotiation, correct? Now, the first prisoner exchange that happened, or hostage exchanges happened, the second, phase 2, is what I'm asking. Why didn't Israel go into what was agreed in phase 2?
I've tried to explain this. You don't be honest. Let me be very clear.
Okay.
We went to phase 2, discussed, and Hamas said, let me be very clear, they said, Hamas, we want to stay in control of our arms and to be de facto in control of Gaza. That is a non-starter. There can be no end to this conflict where Hamas keep their arms and Hamas stay in charge of the Gaza Strip, because in Hamas's words, they will use that in order to prepare for another October the 7th style attack. That's what they intend to do. That's what they're building for. That's what they're going for.
Okay.
And therefore, it was absolutely impossible to come to a conclusion. And I point out to you, the mediators, including America, offered lots of other options. Israel accepted every single one. It was Hamas that rejected them, saying only if we stay with our guns.
Okay, Haaretz reports in the second stage, Hamas would have released all remaining alive male Israelis. This is the phase 2, including civilians and soldiers. In return, Israel would release an agreed upon number of Palestinian prisoners. The prisoner exchanges will be conditioned on both parties agreeing to and announcing a sustainable claim and the withdrawal of remaining Israeli soldiers from the Gaza Strip. Again, I'm sorry, Ambassador, I have to go back. You haven't explained to me where Hamas was not sticking to this deal, because I'm literally reading it.
I don't know why you can't understand this. I want to explain this very, very clearly. In that, as you said, okay, it's very, very clear. Hamas, as their basic terms, it said there will be a sustainable ceasefire. There cannot be a sustainable ceasefire if Hamas are still in control, because Hamas have said they will use that control to kill us. That isn't a sustainable ceasefire. Sustainable means long-term. Sustainable means that Hamas won't kill us again. Hamas said all the way along, publicly, openly, in media, in everywhere, that they intend to rearm and kill us again. That isn't a sustainable ceasefire.
Sorry, they said
the fact that you may not like that doesn't make it not true.
Well, it doesn't matter what I like. I'm asking because I'm basing this on facts, on reports, on international reports. The third stage, let me read out this third stage. In the third stage, Hamas would have released all the remains of deceased Israeli captives in exchange for Israel releasing the remains of deceased Palestinian bodies that it holds. Israel would end the blockade of the Gaza Strip, and Hamas would not rebuild its military capabilities. You see, so I'm not disagreeing. I have to say,
but
I am reading. Pardon?
But Hamas refused that.
But
Hamas
we weren't
said
in
yes
stage
at the
3.
beginning.
But we weren't in stage
but
3.
Hamas said at the beginning,
we were only
yes,
in stage
and then
2.
said we're not going to give up our arms.
No, but
listen, you can go to any Hamas, do a quick Google search now. It will take you all of 3 seconds. Hamas refuses to give up arms, and it will be there. It will do it everywhere. Hamas are not. This is not me saying this.
No,
Hamas aren't hiding this fact.
I'm talking about phase 2, Ambassador. Phase 2 does not say that. I've just read phase 2 and I've read phase 3. Phase 3 is where Hamas is supposed to give up arms. I am not disagreeing with you. I am saying to you, you can't get to phase 3 without phase 2. And phase 2 was supposed to be the extension of releasing of hostages and prisoners and that's what stage 2 to lead us to stage 3.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say you and me were negotiating to buy a house, okay? And we say that the first stage will be that we'll look at the house. The second stage will be that we will exchange contracts. And the third stage will be that we will pay each other, we will pay the relevant money. Okay? I come along and I have a look at your house. The second stage we come to and we say, now's the time to exchange contracts. But I say to you, just to be very clear here, I have absolutely no intention of ever paying you the money. None whatsoever. You will never get a penny from me, but I'm having the house. You would never enter stage 2 and exchange the contracts, right? You just wouldn't do that because you know that you're never going to get to stage 3 because they've been very, very clear that they're never, ever, ever going to pay you the money. And that's what's happened here. We went to stage 2 and Hamas said, let me be very, very clear. We will never give up our arms. We will never lay down our arms. And then you're saying to me, so why didn't you go to stage 2? I'm saying to you, who would do that? No one would go to stage 2 when Hamas have made it very, very clear they've got absolutely no interest. They will never, ever, ever stick to stage 3.
You would like me to do a Google search on, please tell me again.
I'm saying Hamas refused to lay down arms. You do it. It's everywhere. Hamas are saying it very clearly. don't need to do this. Hamas have been over and over again. They will never lay down their arms. They will never agree to that. There's no possibility of it. Now, once you're saying then there's no point in going to take...
Pardon me. I literally Googled what you said. The first one that comes up is AP. A Hamas official says group would lay down its arms if an independent Palestinian state is established. I only Googled what you said.
Okay, but that's not the negotiation.
But you're the one that asked me to go and Google, and you gave me what to Google, right? Senior Hamas leaders say movement isn't interested in in ruling. I have to open it, right? Hold on, let me just open it because I'm doing what you asked for, right? Senior Hamas says movement isn't interested in ruling Gaza, but laying down arms remains a red line. Let me continue. Al Jazeera. Why is Hamas refusing to lay down arms? The movement, this is again June. Oh, sorry.
But the point is, you've now
read June 17.
So what they're refusing to lay down arms.
No. That was June 7. I'm saying to you, when you give that headline, you would get several different links that come up. The last one I read was back to
do me a favor. You've just read, I'm sorry. You've just read 3 articles.
Yeah, but they're all different dates.
They refused to give up their arms in the ceasefire.
What I'm saying, no, it wasn't. One is, look, I read out April. I can literally show you, Michael. You can see.
You don't need to show me.
Because you don't believe me.
You need to show me. I know. You just read it out.
AP, Associated Press.
Giving up their arms is a red line.
I put Associated Press. 25th of April 2024. Mondowiz, which is about the red line. 27th of February 2025. Al Jazeera, 11th of June 2017. The other one that comes in, Hamas laying down arms, non-negotiable. Middle East Monitor, and it goes on and on and on and on. I just Googled. All I'm saying is, I just Googled what you asked me to Google.
I agree with you. Listen, you heard very clearly. Hamas said laying down their arms is a red line. Once they say that, there's no point in going to negotiations when they've already said they won't do 3.
But that's for phase 3. Anyway, let's move on. It's always too interesting. And you and I have, I think, too much, perhaps fun, debating. Let's move on to...
Well, unfortunately, it's not fun. I remind you, 59 of my fellow citizens are currently in dungeons under the ground, being tortured, being assaulted, being starved, being beaten. It is certainly not fun.
Well, it isn't fun. And I would say that 15 Palestinian first responders who were found in a shallow grave this week, which has caused outrage across the world, is not fun. Of course, nobody wants that for anybody. Can you explain how that happened and just help us understand how 15 first responders, or including aid workers, were actually killed and the ambulance was also buried, their bodies were buried in very shallow graves?
The incident you're talking about took place on the 24th of March. The incident you're talking about took place in the evening, in after dark hours. Every first responder, every ambulance knows that in order to pass Israeli troops, especially during active war, they need to coordinate. And that day, earlier in the day, a convoy passed through and went through safely and securely after coordinating with Israel. In the evening, in the instant this took place, the vehicles approached. None of them had lights on. None of them had their emergency lights on. They didn't have their red and blue and red and white flashing lights on. They had absolutely no lights whatsoever. And when they approached and they were challenged, they carried on driving. Israel opened fire. And we know that of those people that were killed, at least 9 of them were terrorists. One of them was Mohammed Shabaki, who was involved in the October 7th massacre. He was inside Israel and murdered Israelis in cold blood. And the other 8 were part of the Islamic Jihad and other terror organizations. And therefore, what this actually shows is that Hamas and the terrorists were abusing medical systems, abusing the convoy in order to transport terrorists around the Gaza Strip. And this incident, if there were innocent doctors in that convoy as well, or innocent aid workers, then we absolutely need to blame Hamas for allowing Islamic Jihad and the other terrorists for using ambulances with doctors in it to transport their people around. But it is an absolute abuse by Hamas. And you cannot expect Israel, when it is in the middle of a war against a genocidal, brutal, rapist army, to not take the basic care that any army would take.
The IDF didn't say as much as you said. So I guess there's been an investigation to show that.
So this is the IDF statement. This is the IDF statement.
So they've since said that. So those people were Islamic jihads, and the UN.
At least 8 of them.
At least 8 of them, and the UN aid worker.
Well, if there were UN aid workers there, the question needs to be addressed. Obviously, that's a tragedy, but war is a tragedy. But we need to ask Hamas why they were using ambulances and why Islamic Jihad were using aid workers as shields. How can it be that Hamas and Islamic Jihad can use medical workers and use aid workers as human shields, and the world says, Israel shouldn't do anything? We cannot accept that. We cannot accept Islamic Jihad and Hamas doing this. This is outrageous. It's disgusting. It's a breach of international law, and it puts innocents in danger, and we need to condemn it.
Okay, Ambassador, I need you to listen to this very quickly.
A spokesperson for the Palestine Red Crescent Society and joins us now from Ramallah. I know this is a slightly silly question, Nebal, but for some of my listeners, we'll be introducing themselves to the detail for the first time. So can you just run us through the circumstances that led up to the killings 10 days ago?
Good morning, and thanks for having me. The Palestine Red Crescent is devastated by the killing of 8 medics of my colleagues who were killed while performing their humanitarian duties. This makes up the total number of PRCS members who have been killed while wearing the Red Crescent emblem to 27 PRCS staff and volunteers were killed in the Gaza Strip since October 2023. We received a call for help for injured civilians after a home was bombed. So an ambulance or 2 ambulances were dispatched to the same incident. One of the ambulances managed to get to the location and transport the casualties to the hospital, but the other ambulance, which was dispatched from a different ambulance station, did not come back. So the connection was lost, and then we asked the other ambulance to go and check on their colleagues on their ambulance station because they were not picking up their phones. On the road, they found the PRCS ambulance, and the doors were open, and there was a number of casualties on the ground, injured, including our staff.
It's very difficult to hear, so maybe you can just make the point that you're trying to make, because it's very difficult for me to hear.
Transporting and evacuating the wounded, including the staff. And it turns out that even the 2 ambulances who were dispatched later to save their lives, they also came under heavy gun fire, as one paramedic was over the line with the dispatcher. We heard a heavy gunfire, and then later we heard sound of Israeli soldiers in the location talking to each other before the line was completely lost. And this is the team member who is still missing up to this moment, as out of the 10 paramedics who were responding, 10 PRCS paramedics, 1 colleague is still missing, and we believe he might be arrested. Other colleague was released in the same day, and he is the only survivor from the ambulance team. He is the only survivor. He was at the first ambulance who went missing and tried to check on them. And he confirmed that a heavy gunfire, they were subjected to a heavy Israeli gunfire. And both colleagues who were in the front of the ambulance were injured or killed.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Well, bear with me. We're coming back online. So there's one of the heads of the Red Crescent explaining what happened, which, of course, is in complete contradiction to what you said. But I just wanted, for balance, I wanted you to hear, but you said you couldn't hear. But it was important for
But
our listeners to hear.
Here's the problem. I hear Palestinian lies and Hamas lies all the time. To plainly
So
get
every
another...
Palestinian is a liar?
No, absolutely not.
Well, so
Absolutely
how
not.
do you
That's not
know
what I
that
said.
woman is lying?
Well, I'm saying to you that may be her perception, that may be what she thinks, but I've just told you that we know that we've given names to the people who were killed. We've told you who they were. We told you there was Mohammed Shakabi, and there were others who were in that ambulance as well that took part in the October the 7th massacre. Israel does not open fire. Israel does not open fire on aid workers. We do not do anything to attack or hurt aid workers in any way. We want to protect aid workers, and that is absolutely what the Israeli army and the Israeli people are about.
But we've had, I don't know the numbers off my head right now. I could check it up if you'd like me to Google it. But we've had scores of aid workers killed since October 8th, when this genocide began. We have had.
Well, firstly, let me stop you. It's not a genocide. To
Why
call it
not?
a genocide is deeply... Well, because it's not a genocide and it's deeply offensive to call it a genocide.
But why not?
There is no... Well, because a genocide is wiping out people. The Holocaust, when the Germans wiped out 6 million people, was a genocide.
But
in Rwanda,
incidentally, if I
when
may
they
correct
murdered
you,
1 million
Ambassador,
people...
genocide is not by number. It is actually, if I may help you, because I have actually had scholars and lawyers and over 700 experts. In fact, one of them is the Israeli expert on genocide, who has actually proclaimed this a genocide. Even though the ICC,
but I'm glad that he does. But there is no serious.
Permit me to finish. Genocide is not defined by number of people that have been killed. Genocide is defined by the words that are said and the actions that match those words, which is then carried out on the ground. So whether you agree
with genocide, you a question.
You've just said to me it's not a genocide, and I'm asking you why.
I'm going to explain to you why. It's very, very clear. Firstly, because we're not killing people who are innocent. We are not going around massacring people. Secondly, we worked with and enabled the UN to enter into the Gaza Strip and give a full polio vaccination to all of the children within the Gaza Strip. We have allowed in thousands and thousands of tons of aid into the Gaza Strip. We have declared where we are going to attack. We have created humanitarian zones. We have taken people out to hospitals. We have done all of those things. That is not a genocide. A genocide is a term being used by people for a very deliberate reason. They know it's not a genocide. They know it's got nothing to do with a genocide, but they want to turn on the Jewish people the ultimate genocide, which was the murder of the Jews during the Holocaust, and they want to turn that into, they want to minimize it, they want to turn it into a political tool to call what's going on in Gaza as a genocide is offensive, it is unfactual, it is based on lies, on distortion, and cannot in any way stand up to a serious examination. And so it's utterly outrageous to describe this as a genocide. In a year and a half of war, according to Hamas statistics, and you know what I think about Hamas statistics, okay? They're talking about under 70,000 people being killed. You and I both know that the Israeli army are capable of doing a lot of damage. 70,000 people is not a lot of damage, especially when, according to Hamas's own figures, and again, I don't trust them at all, 72% of all of the casualties are fighting-age men.
Right. So, Raphael Lemkin, I had to Google his name. He's the one.
I understand who you're going to quote,
bear with
but
me.
I can quote you back.
No.
But I
bear
can
with
quote
me.
you back
Michael,
hundreds of other people.
I did let you finish. What is genocide? Genocide is the intentional and systematic destruction of a racial, ethnic, religious, national, or cultural group. The term was coined by Raphael Lemkin in 1944, combining the Greek words geno, race or nation, and side, which is killing. So it is not defined by numbers. Now, of course, it's yet to go to court. Perhaps when it goes to court, but what the ICJ did rule is that it is a plausible genocide. And you and I
No, it
understand.
didn't.
But it did.
No, it didn't. No, it didn't.
Michael, Ambassador.
With greatest pleasure, Google it. The ICJ did not rule that there was a plausible genocide. What the ICJ ruled very clearly, and it was explained by Donaldson, the president of the court, that what she said was that it is plausible for South Africa to bring the case. Not that there is plausible genocide. You may check this very clearly. The president of the ICJ, in an interview with the BBC, made very, very clear what their ruling was, and she said very clearly, we did not rule there was plausible case of genocide. If you're going to quote...
The ruling, bear with me, the ruling issued by the ICJ ordered 6 provisional measures, including for Israel, to refrain from acts under the Genocidal Convention and prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to genocide, and take immediate effective measures to ensure the provision of humanitarian assistance to civilians. I could go on.
But we did all of those things. I'm not arguing with that. We've done all of those things. What you said to me
What would you call the Ramadan massacre?
Hold on a minute. Hang on a minute. What you said to me was that the ICJ ruled that it was a provision, that it was a plausible genocide. The ICJ made no such ruling. And if you want to Google it, Google it. The court president, the American court president, in an interview with the BBC, made very, very clear that that is not what they ruled at all. So if you're going to make accusations,
but I just read part of the ruling to you. But anyway, let's continue.
But listen, read. I understand you've read the ruling, but unless you are an international lawyer, I
have had international lawyers here.
But hang on a minute. But I suggest we listen to the president of the court that made the ruling. She's the one that made the ruling, and she said that was not what the court ruled. Like, you can say anything you like, but the president of the court themselves said that's not what we ruled.
I have had several international lawyers here as my guests, but let's move on. We're not doing very well. I mean, again, you like doing Google. No, you wanted me to Google. You wanted me to Google. I don't waste my time.
But at the moment,
Ambassador, I don't waste my time to Google whilst I'm interviewing. But you wanted me to Google. No, that's why. No. You asked me earlier. You asked me earlier. So
1 second. I don't need to ask you. I would have expected you. 1 second. I would have expected you to have done your research.
I did.
We challenged you. Well, hang on a minute. We challenged you when you put out the word genocide on your tweet. We made contact with you and said to your team that it is outrageous and we made contact with your team. You need to follow that up.
I wasn't aware of that.
Saying that we are deeply offended by using the word genocide. It isn't true. It isn't accurate in any way whatsoever. And we pointed out that the president of the Supreme Court, of the International Court, ruled that that is not what they ruled. And so, therefore, to make those accusations is deeply problematic, especially when we highlighted it in advance. It's offensive, and I would ask you not to call it a genocide and to think very carefully before you use words which are laden and which are outrageous and which do not do anything to further the cause of peace.
You know what I did? I went beyond Google and I went to AI. Did ICJ rule on plausible genocide? The International Court of Justice did indeed rule on plausible genocide. I'm in a recent order.
Again, I'm not having this fight with you.
You can't have it both ways.
Listen,
you actually can't have it both ways, I'm afraid.
I agree with you, but AI...
You answer some... So you don't like AI, you don't like Google.
We're
not going to get very far. Right? We're not going to get very far.
But here's the problem.
You said I should do my research. I said I've done my research. I've had international lawyers on here.
I don't want to get into this fight with you.
But you are pushing it.
Hang on a minute. Now, and I'll tell you why. Okay? I enjoy coming on this program.
So do I. I enjoy having you here.
But this program isn't a balanced program. Okay? I listened to your previous hour. At no point did you challenge, in a serious way, the Palestinian ambassador. You did not play to him messages or things from October the 7th. You hardly spoke about October the 7th.
I didn't talk to you about October the 7th.
You argued...
Because we've talked about October the 7th many times.
Please let me finish. Okay? You hardly challenged him. When I come on, like a good journalist, you challenge me on everything, but I don't feel that you challenge equally both people in this conversation. I've just said to you that the BBC has an article which was very clear by the President of the Supreme Court. We both know that AI is deeply problematic in many different areas. All you need to do, if you really want to understand this, is to President of ICJ, BBC interview, was it plausible genocide? And the first article will come up, will be her saying that's not what we ruled on. You don't need AI, you can get the words directly from the President of the International Court of Justice.
Okay, so the lines are already going and we're at 37. What I will say to you is I did do my research, for one. Number two, we also, I've had international lawyers here. I will look for that BBC interview. Of that, I promise you. Number three is I didn't talk to the ambassador, to the Palestinian ambassador by October 7th, just like I didn't talk to you about October 7th, because we are where we are now. Permit me, please. No, permit me, please. Because we are where we are now. I started with the ceasefire. That's exactly how I started with him. And that is where we are now. If I had 3 hours to talk to you, I would happily go back. But you and I have spoken about October 7th, more than once, more than twice. I've had Hamas on here and I've queried them about October 7th, more than once, more than twice. So we can't keep going back there because we need to be
But of course we do.
But Ambassador,
nothing makes sense.
We have President Trump who actually pushed for the ceasefire that President Biden wasn't able to make happen. We are now in the Trump administration of America, and we have had a ceasefire. That ceasefire, of course, saved lives on both sides, right? Now we are at a place where fighting has resumed. So if I keep going back to October 7th and you're happy to talk about it, I am not going to be able to actually talk about what's happening now.
But what's happening now is only because of October the 7th.
But we've talked about... What would you like to talk about on October 7th?
I let you speak. I need to make this clear. And I think, firstly, you referred to President Trump. Let's be very clear. President Trump said to Hamas, if you don't release all the hostages now, the gates of hell will open. Well, I point out to you, they didn't release all of the hostages. We gave them another month. They still didn't release the hostages. We gave them another 2 weeks. They still didn't release the hostages. We have now resumed our combat in order to release the hostages. As President Trump said, either release the hostages or face the gates of hell. So Hamas still has a clear choice, and they don't have much more time. But you keep saying about we can't go back to October the 7th. But everything that's happening in Gaza today is because of October the 7th. If October the 7th wouldn't have happened, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be in this war. There wouldn't be a talk about a ceasefire, because on October the 6th, there was a ceasefire. On October the 7th at 6:28, there was a ceasefire. Hamas broke that ceasefire. They launched the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. They raped, they burned people alive, they tortured, they kidnapped, they butchered, and then after that, they boasted and they were happy about it and they had parties in the street. They started this. And unfortunately, in international law, you do not get to start a war and then when you're losing that war, suddenly cry to the world and say, stop it, stop it, stop it. Hamas started this war. They massacred Israelis. They murdered. They raped. They butchered. And that is why this war is going on. And if you want this war to finish tomorrow, it's very easy. I'll tell you how the war can finish tomorrow. Hamas releases 59 hostages and lays down its arms. It's over, we're done, and that's the end of everything. But Hamas won't do that because Hamas doesn't care about the Palestinians. Hamas only cares about jihad and about killing Jews and about killing Israelis. And therefore, Hamas will continue to do this and bring more and more misery on the Palestinian people. But make no mistake, everything that's happening today, everything that's going on in the Gaza Strip is only because of October the 7th.
Okay. So you mentioned international law. Does Israel believe in international law?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there is a warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, President Benjamin Netanyahu, and Yoav Gallant, right? Yet that same warrant.
Well, it's interesting you bring up you.
Well, no, you see, you can't produce me. I'm sorry. You just can't, right? I let you finish.
Sorry, I thought you finished.
I let you finish. And it's because of what you said. You said international law. You mentioned it. And that's why I'm asking, does Israel believe international law? And you said yes. And then I'm saying there's a warrant for President Netanyahu and there's a warrant for Gallant. There was also 2 warrants for Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh and the other guy whose name escapes me right now, both of whom are dead, right? Both of whom are dead. But of course, President Netanyahu is still around, and so is Yoav Gallant. Why then is Israel saying that the warrant is a witch hunt, if you like? I'm paraphrasing, I beg your pardon. Is a witch hunt against, or why is President Netanyahu saying it's a witch hunt against Israel? If Israel actually believes and respects international law, I'm going to need you to answer that very quickly because we're fast.
I'll answer it very quickly. It's very easy to answer that because international law has standing. And actually, if you look at the international law case here, it's very, very clear. Firstly, Israel's not a signatory to the Rome Statute. Israel is not a member of the International Court and therefore is not subject to the laws and rules of the International Court.
Why isn't Israel a signature to the Rome Statute?
It's not. Secondly, hang on a minute, let me finish. You asked me to explain quickly. I can't keep going to Secondly, so therefore there is absolutely no jurisdiction whatsoever from the court. Secondly, okay, the court itself is politicized and biased. At the time, the president of the court was a Lebanese gentleman who is now in Lebanon saying that we will never, ever, ever have peace with Israel. We can never have peace. We can never have any relations with Israel. That doesn't seem like a neutral person to be able to have a conversation with. But also on a point of international law, Israel has an independent judiciary that has tried and put in prison previous Israeli prime minister, previous Israeli president, and according to international law, there is no jurisdiction for an international court when there is it's complementarity is the legal term behind it, that when Israel has its own court who are capable and have proven themselves of investigating issues such as this, there is absolutely no jurisdiction of the court to do that. This is a politicized decision that is not based on international court. The decision was condemned by many different countries around the world. And I think that in the long run, this will do more damage to the credibility of the international justice system than it will do to Israel, because this has been proven to be a clear politicized witch hunt which has got nothing to do and is not based in any way on international law, because if it was, there is no jurisdiction and the law of complementarity must hold.
Amnesty International's report demonstrates that Israel has carried out acts prohibited under the Genocide Convention with the specific intent, permits me, to destroy Palestinians in Gaza. These acts include killings causing serious bodily or mental harm and the deliberate inflicting on Palestinians in Gaza's condition of life calculated to bring out their physical destruction. So, I'm asking, we have so much, and we've literally run out of time. Let's go back and talk about the hostage families. The hostage.
One second. Just on the Amnesty report, literally one sentence. Sorry. Just on the Amnesty report, it's very important to understand that Amnesty is not a credible, serious organisation, and I say that because I'm sure you're aware that there was an Amnesty branch in Israel as well. The Amnesty branch disagreed with that report and said, we can prove that report is not legitimate and and is not based on reality and not based on fact. And the response of Amnesty was to kick the Amnesty Israel branch out of Amnesty. Instead of having a conversation and dealing with it, they just kicked the Amnesty branch out. So let's look at Amnesty for who they are. They are a racist organisation who, when it comes to Israel, won't have a serious conversation, and they cannot be serious and cannot be legitimate when they have any dissenting voice. They just kick them out of the organisation. Okay. That's not a serious NGO. That's a dictatorship.
Okay. Before I go to the cause, and literally the lines are alive, but I need to ask about the hostages. There is a weekly march, a weekly protest against government in Tel Aviv, and the hostages want their families. Hostage families want their children, their families back, rightfully so, and they are accusing the President Netanyahu of not putting the lives of their loved ones first. Like you said, there were 53 or so Israeli hostages that are still left in Gaza, continuing to bomb, indiscriminate bombings like we woke up to for the Ramadan massacre, which was during Ramadan, and all of this. Do you not think it's putting the Israeli hostages that are in Hamas captivity, whom you said are underground, do you not think it's putting their lives at risk?
Well, Hamas has refused. There's so much in those few sentences. Hamas is the one refusing to release the hostages. Every Israeli, from the prime minister down to the very last citizen of Israel, wants to release those hostages and wants to release them now. The disagreement in Israel is about what's the best way to do so. And everybody in the security and political establishment and the leadership of Israel believes that you need to put military pressure on Hamas, because without military pressure, they won't agree to release the hostages.
But there is
no one in Israel who doesn't...
You've got the lives of the hostages at risk. Even just like
okay, but I understand that.
I understand civilians.
No. Okay, please I let you go through. Okay, please. There are no easy decisions here. There is no easy decisions. Every decision is heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching and it's soul-destroying about these hostages. But the security establishment, people who have much more knowledge in this, the head of the Mossad, the head of the Shabak, all of the army, the people, all say Hamas are not willing to negotiate and not willing to release. The only way to do this is to put more military pressure on them. And I trust them and believe them. The argument in Israel is whether or not we should use military pressure or whether or not military pressure won't work. Nobody disagrees about releasing hostages. And you talked about the protests, and I'm incredibly proud that there are protests every week, and that you have a protest and you go home and then the next week you can come out and protest again. Because Israel is a democracy, a thriving democracy with an independent court system. Last week, 2 weeks ago in Gaza, there were large protests. Many thousands of people protested against Hamas, but they just shot them, and now there's no protests. And that's the difference with what we're dealing with here. You cannot compare one side to the other. In Israel, you have a free, independent democracy that has protests, enjoys protest, allows it. And in Gaza, if you protest, you are shot and killed.
Right, it was one person that was shot, actually, a 22-year-old.
Well, a number of people are.
No, actually it was one. Reporting, and this is from CNN. It wasn't from anywhere else. CNN reports one. And of course, if you were listening to my question, to my interview with the previous guest, it's something that I also put to him. So let's go back and talk about it before. I promise I will open the calls. My final question, and then you guys can take over. My final question is, does Israel want peace? And if Israel wants peace, why not just say to the Palestinians, there, we've got our bit, we've got our part, you keep your part, we're not going to be a part of it. In fact, would it not make sense to actually give the Palestinians their freedom so that they can choose a democratically elected government that possibly will not have an ideology of resistance and militancy? Surely Israel must want that.
Okay. So firstly, Hamas doesn't have an ideology of militancy and resistance. Hamas has an ideology of genocide, of anti-Semitism, of killing every single Jew in the world and killing every single Israeli and wiping Israel off the face of the earth. That's their ideology, and we shouldn't beat around the bush when it comes to that. But you talk about Israel. In 1947, the United Nations proposed we divide the land into two states. Israel accepts. The Arabs rejected. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, Israel proposed we give the Palestinians have a state. Israel accepted. The Palestinians in Khartoum issued the three no's that they will not have any negotiations, any recognition, and no peace. And then again, we had in Camp David, when President Clinton and Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat and Israel made an offer of 98% of the West Bank, including land swaps, and the Palestinians said no. Then Ehud Olmert came with another map, which was published a few weeks ago, offering 99% plus things, and the Palestinians said no. And then in 2005, Israel left the Gaza Strip completely. Every single soldier, every single civilian, and we left behind all of the greenhouses, all of our factories, and allowed the Palestinians to build an independent state that could be thriving with a port, with the potential for an airport. And the Palestinian government under Hamas decided that instead of building a state, they would take all of the billions of dollars of investment from the international community. They would steal huge parts of it. All the people living in Qatar are multi-billionaires. And the rest of that money, they wouldn't build a hospital. They wouldn't build any schools. They wouldn't build any universities. No. They take the money, they'll build rockets, they'll buy bombs, they'll buy guns, and they will build the largest terror infrastructure that the world has ever known, including the longest underground tunnel system anywhere, longer than the London Underground. Okay. And that's what Hamas decided to do. So when you ask me, we've offered and offered and offered and entered negotiations after negotiations after negotiations, and the Palestinians have rejected time after time after time after time.
So why now does President Netanyahu and indeed Israel want to take another 60% of the Gaza in a very small land called Gaza?
We don't.
No, but it was President Netanyahu announced it this week. Would you like me to read it?
No, he did not say that at all. Again, if you're going to quote Prime Minister, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the
this
cabinet
is a CNN report, by the way, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm very pleased. It doesn't mean it's accurate. Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel, until Hamas releases the hostages, we will start to increase military pressure, and we will increase that military pressure in different areas of the Gaza Strip. And initially, we are going to increase that pressure in 60% of the Gaza Strip, and therefore over 60% the Palestinian civilians need to leave in order for us to carry out our military operations to avoid injuring or harming or hurting Palestinians. And that's what we're doing. We have no territorial desire over Gaza. We do not want to be there. We have no desire to be there. We left in 2005 and we have no intention of going back.
So what does Defense Minister Gantz mean by the seizure of large areas of land that will be incorporated into Israel's security zones? What does he mean by that?
Well, I think that's self-explanatory. We will have a security zone. Well, I'm explaining. We will have a security zone around the Gaza Strip, which will stop Hamas from entering into Israel and massacring our people. And as long as Hamas refuse to release the hostages and refuse to lay down their arms, we will need to increase that security zone. As soon as Hamas release the hostages, as soon as Hamas lay down their arms, then that security zone becomes less of a need and we can have a conversation. But what I'm saying to you is we have none. Let me be very clear. No territorial desire, no territorial demands over Gaza in any way whatsoever. We do not want to be there. We left in 2005. All of this war started on October the 7th when Hamas massacred over 1,200 Israelis. They came in, they raped,
to your number one
they murdered,
for talk.
they butchered, they burned families alive, they kidnapped 250 people, and that's what started.
But I must have to, I do have to say, I have a quote of Prime Minister and we have to go. He said, we are also doing something else. We are seizing the Mora corridor. This will be the second Philadelphia, an additional Philadelphia corridor. He said, that's a quote from, but we've run out of time. I have to go.
That's a small thing. I'm happy to come back. I'm happy to come back.
Oh, yes, please. That would be great. I will get the producer to get in touch. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you.
And have a good weekend.
And you.
Play.ng or dial *347 *880 *3#. Play with
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.